Hi everyone, welcome to Selling to Healthcare. I'm Lisa Miller. I've spent over 25 years inside hospital operations, selling, consulting, building, and running my own company, and now helping companies figure out how to actually get in front of hospital executives and win. And I'm here to share what I've learned about this environment and about what's changing right now. So a few weeks back, at the very end of my episode on context selling, I made you a promise. I was talking about how building real context for a C-suite conversation, the narrative, the data, the deep preparation, how that work has always been incredibly labor intensive. Like at VIE, we did all of it by hand for years. And right at the end of that episode, I said something was changing because of AI, that AI agents are starting to do in minutes what used to take us weeks. And I said that deserved a whole episode of its own. Well, this is that episode. Actually, it turned into 2 episodes because there was just too much to fit in one. So today is part 1, and it's all about what's actually changed. And next week is part 2, where I get really practical and walk you through, exactly what to build. So let me start with something I've been noticing across almost every company I talk to right now. Because the vendors selling into health systems, they're quietly splitting into 2 groups. And the line between them, it isn't size, it isn't budget, it isn't how long they've been around or how big their marketing team is. It's really just this one group understands what's now actually possible with AI, and the other group is using it to send more emails. That's the whole divide. And right now, only a small number of healthcare vendors are in that first group, but when they walk into a C-suite meeting, they show up with something no competitor has, and they're winning deals because of it. So today I want to talk about what's actually driving that divide, because I don't think it's the thing most people assume it is. It's not that one group went out and bought, fancier software. It's that something fundamental has changed inside the hospitals you're selling to. And honestly, most sales organizations just haven't caught up to it yet. So let me start there inside the building, because for most of healthcare's history, the business side of a hospital ran on manual work, right? If you wanted to know what a hospital was spending, you had to go and get it. And I mean that literally. Sometimes it meant sitting in an accounts payable department, copying invoices by hand and carrying them back to your team to analyze. Early on at VIE, we would take that invoice information and enter it into Excel line by line. I had 7, 8, 9 people doing that work at one point. It was repetitive, it was painstaking, it was incredibly detailed, but it gave us a level of visibility that almost nobody else had. Because we weren't just looking at totals, we understood what hospitals were actually buying and how they were buying it and where the variation was hiding and where the money was leaking out in plain sight. And then, over the years, the environment changed. Invoices went digital, remote access replaced sitting in that AP department, automation replaced the manual data entry, and each one of those shifts, it took out a little bit of friction and it opened up a little more visibility. But here's the thing, right? The underlying model never actually changed. It was always people doing the analytical work as fast as they could with whatever tools they happened to have in front of them. And what's happening now, it's different. And I want to be really precise about this because I think the precision matters. It's not different in degree, it's different in kind. Because health systems are starting to deploy AI agents as an actual operational reality. And these are not chatbots, right? They're not the little automation tools you might be picturing. The really interesting ones are discipline specific. So picture an agent that's trained on nothing but spine spend, and another one trained on reference lab, and another on purchase services, and maybe another on contracts, or utilization, or surgeon variation, and what all of that means for reimbursement. And each one of those agents works continuously in its own narrow domain. It learns what normal looks like. It flags the thing that doesn't fit. And it surfaces the kind of insight that used to depend on a skilled analyst with weeks of runway. Let me make that concrete. So a good spine spend agent, it isn't just adding up what the hospital paid for implants, right? It's noticing that one surgeon's construct costs are running, 40% above his peers for the same procedure with no difference in outcomes. And it's connecting that to the contract terms and to the vendor's pricing tiers and flagging it the moment it drifts, not 9 months later when somebody finally gets around to the analysis. So think about the sharpest financial analyst you have ever worked with. And now imagine that person never sleeps. They never forget a contract renewal, and they never lose the thread because they're juggling 6 other priorities at the same time. That's a lot closer to what we're actually talking about here. And I think the easiest way to understand the whole shift is, it's the arc from the copy machine to the AI agent. I actually wrote about this not long ago, the full progression and what that arc means for the business side of healthcare. And the short version is that for decades, every single gain in healthcare's back office was about removing friction from a process that fundamentally stayed the same. So you had the copier, then digital records, then remote access, then automation, and every one of those made the existing work a little faster. But now, for the first time, we're not just removing friction from the work, right? We're handing the analytical work itself over to something that does it continuously on its own. And the practical result is that the hospitals you sell into are getting access to a level of intelligence about their own operations that they have genuinely never had before in the history of the institution. And I know, some of you are listening and thinking, okay, Lisa, that sounds like the future, but is this actually happening like right now in real buildings, or is this a couple of pilots in Silicon Valley? And it's real. So let me give you one example that I think makes it concrete. There's a company called Assort Health, and they're a healthcare AI company built on Google's Gemini models. They deployed specialty-trained AI agents inside healthcare organizations to handle the full range of patient interactions. So that's scheduling, insurance capture, medication refills, proactive outreach for care gaps, all of it. And the results, across more than 50 million patient interactions were 89% shorter wait times and an 81% lower call abandonment rate. And those are not rounding error numbers, right? Those are the kind of numbers that change a budget conversation. Now, that particular example is in patient access. It's not supply chain, it's not finance, it's not the exact discipline most of you are selling into, but the underlying principle, it is exactly the same. There are AI agents operating at scale today inside the organizations you are trying to sell into. That is not a forecast. That's just the environment now. And the same thing that makes an agent good at patient access, the fact that it's specialty trained, that it works continuously, that it doesn't get tired or distracted, that's the same thing that makes it good at spend or contracts or reimbursement. So if it's already working at that scale on the front end, you have to assume it's coming for the back office you sell into fast. So here's why all of this matters for you, even if you never personally touch a single one of those agents, because it elevates what your buyers can do and it raises the bar for what they expect from you. The hospital executives you're calling on, they're gaining access to faster, sharper intelligence about their own organization. So a CFO who used to wait 3 weeks for a purchase services analysis, they can surface that in near real time now. A supply chain leader who could never get clean visibility into surgeon spine spend, they can have an agent working that problem continuously in the background all the time. And think about what that does to your timelines, right? A value analysis committee that used to take an entire quarter to work through an evaluation because somebody had to manually pull and reconcile all the data, that committee can now do the same work in a week or two. So a lot of the assumptions you've built your sales cycle around, how long things take, where the bottlenecks are, what the buyer can and can't see, a lot of those assumptions are quietly becoming wrong. And let me just paint the before and after, because I think it's stark. So 3 years ago, you walk into a meeting and you bring the CFO an insight about their own spend, and there's a decent chance you know something they don't, right? You did the homework, you found the leak, you're the one with the visibility. That was a real edge. Today, that same CFO might have already seen it, surfaced by an agent last Tuesday. So the effect of that on you is honestly kind of brutal if you're not ready for it, because a CEO's tolerance for a vendor who doesn't understand their world, that is dropping fast. The C-suite is having more informed internal conversations than they have ever had, and they fully expect the people sitting across the table from them to keep up, or, better yet, to be a step ahead. And I want to be clear about what I'm not saying here, because I think this is where people get nervous. I'm not saying the AI replaces your salespeople. It doesn't. It's not replacing the judgment or the relationships or the point of view that a skilled rep brings into a room. What it does is take the analytical grunt work, the stuff that used to eat weeks, and it compresses it down to minutes. And that's actually the opportunity, right? Because it frees your best people up to spend their time on the work that actually moves deals. Building the relationship, developing the insight nobody else has, showing up to a C-suite meeting with something genuinely worth that executive's time. The AI does the digging. Your people do the thinking and the trust building. That's the partnership. And if you want a signal for just how fast this whole thing is moving, I'd point you to what Google announced at I/O this year, I/O 2026, because the theme of the keynote, the line they kept coming back to was now anyone can be a builder. And they rolled out these vibe coding tools inside Google AI Studio, where basically anyone with a smartphone and an idea can build a working custom app. No engineering team, no 6-month roadmap, no budget approval, just an idea and an afternoon. And I think that announcement should land really differently for a sales leader than it does for everybody else, because it raises a question that I think every single sales organization should be sitting with right now. And the question is just, what are you building for your clients? And if your honest answer is nothing, I gently say, treat this as a bit of a wake-up call. And look, before I get into it, I actually do understand the instinct that got us here. Because follow-up is a genuinely hard, maddening problem in healthcare sales, right? Executives go quiet, deals stall for months. The rep doesn't know what to say, so they say something generic and just hope. So when a tool shows up that makes follow-up faster and cheaper, of course, people grab it. I get it. But more messages was never actually the thing that was going to fix it. And here's where most sales organizations went when the AI wave actually hit. They looked at all this brand new capability, and they decided to point it at outreach. So they use it to send more emails and more LinkedIn messages. They build follow-up sequences that are faster and cheaper to produce than they have ever been. And the result, right, the actual result on the receiving end is that hospital executives are now getting even more sales messages that all sound completely identical because they were all built on the same low-effort prompt. And you know exactly the kind of message. I mean, you've gotten them too. It's the LinkedIn DM that goes, hi, Lisa, I came across your profile and was truly impressed by your thought leadership in the healthcare space. At this or that company, we empower organizations like yours to unlock synergies and drive transformational outcomes. Do you have 15 minutes Thursday? And it's polished, the grammar's perfect, and it is instantly, obviously, a machine talking to a list. There's not one specific thing in it about me or my organization or anything I'm actually dealing with. And a hospital CFO who gets 40 of those a week, they've developed a delete reflex that is faster than you can imagine. So that is group 2. That's a sales org using the single most powerful tool of our lifetimes to do slightly more of the exact thing that was already getting them ignored. They didn't change what they were doing. They just put it on a faster machine. But then there's group 1. And group 1 looked at the exact same technology and made a completely different decision. They decided to use AI to think. So they're building assets that carry their narrative right into the C-suite. They're asking the kinds of questions that get a CFO to actually lean in instead of writing a generic follow-up that's never going to get a reply. And I mean really specific questions, the ones most vendors never bother to ask. Like, what are the metrics that matter most to this particular health system right now, this year? What regulatory pressures are they actually navigating? Where are they underperforming relative to their peers, and do they even know it? What does their service line profitability look like? And then, how does what I sell connect to that exact picture? That's the homework group 1 is doing before the meeting, while group 2 is drafting another follow-up sequence. They're taking publicly available data, the stuff that's sitting right there for anyone, and they're turning it into insight that opens doors. And I'm a big believer, that the sales organizations who figure this out in the next 12 to 18 months, they're going to build a compounding advantage that is really, really hard to close. And it's not because AI is magic, right? It's because showing up with genuine intelligence about a specific health system built on real data presented in a format an executive will actually forward to their CEO that has always earned a CFO's trust. That part isn't new at all. AI just makes it possible to do that at a level of depth and speed that was never realistic before. So that's the divide. And here's where I'm going to leave you for this week, because next week in part 2, I'm going to get really, really specific about what living in group 1 actually looks like. And I want to do it through a story, because I had a client, a physician who was trying to expand his work with hospitals, and he had barely given me any data to work with at all. So I went and found my own. And by the end of it, we had built this little app that he could open up right in the middle of a C-suite meeting where you type in any hospital, his target, a competitor's, anyone's, and it pulls that hospital's actual data live from publicly available sources. And I'm going to walk you through exactly how that came together, step by step, so that you can go and build your own version of it. because that is not a deck, and it's the clearest example I have of what it actually means to use AI to think instead of just to send. So for this week, I just want you to sit with one question, and it's the same one Google put up on that stage. What are you building for your clients? Not what are you sending them? What are you building? And if the honest answer is nothing yet, you know what? That's actually good news, because it means the window is still open and you still have time to be early. If you want to start having this conversation inside your own commercial team, there's a link in the show notes to reach me directly. And I've also got some free resources in there that go deeper on all of this, so make sure to check it out. All right, that's it for today's episode of Selling to Healthcare. I'm Lisa Miller, and I'll be back next week with part 2 and the story of exactly what we built. Until next time.